Hey everyone, today we are going to see something special from my channel. We are going to do a plein air painting, but not outside, but from my balcony. And this is the painting that I finished. And I'm using a very simple color palette, a titanium white and a chrome yellow, deep yellow ochre, burnt sienna, and ivory black. I'm not using a blue, but I later added an alizarin crimson for a red building. Here I'm just mapping out, the building that we have in front of us, just to indicate a basic shape that is definite, and we are going to move backwards on it. Now this is Sunday, so I am a bit relaxed and started this in the afternoon. So the light is of winter. It's not the summer, but the full winter is yet to come, and the light becomes very dull. But right now it's not the case. Here I'm indicating all the shapes, and will gradually be moving into other things that are there. Here is another building. The basic objective is to do a tonal drawing as quickly as possible, which part is lighter, which part is darker, and that's what I'm mapping out. Some trees, some buildings in the distance, and distant foliage and the sky, and that's it. Which part is more dark and which part is light. So this is more or less it. And the sky is practically white, so I'm using mostly white to indicate the sky color. It's actually very flat and looks very humid, but we don't have humidity right now. Very little humidity. But strangely, the sky is absolutely white. I'm adding a slight amount of black to indicate some buildings in the distance, some skyscrapers there. They are not that visible, but some indications. I'm using a very thick brush to indicate the shapes with just one or two strokes, and that's it. Now I've moved on to the farthest foliage structures that I can see, and it's very light but darker than the buildings that we had in the distance. So some parts, so we need to create some sort of a variation here. Some parts are cooler, some parts are darker, some parts are warmer, some parts are lighter. And here I'm going to add alizarin crimson for some buildings, probably a school building, a local school building which is slightly pinkish in nature. So I'm going to use that and indicate the basic shapes of the building. The brushes that you see, actually the painting is 5 by 7 inches, so it's very small. So brushes that you see, even though it looks small, but becomes very big in relation to the painting size. So one or two strokes would cover the whole area. So these brushes are not the best of any kind, but used brushes, but they do their jobs depending upon the situation in which they are used. Sometimes it's a little difficult, but they are okay for a painting of this size. And if you want to be a little bit more careful with your mark making, maybe you can use dagger brushes four or five of slightly smaller, slightly larger, and they will do the job. I carry a lot of brushes for plein air painting because I reserve some of the brushes for a particular color group. For example, I'm not going to use this brush where it's darker or maybe a green or something, so I won't use that. I will use this, and when it's done I may use it a nearer section, and that's it. I mostly use softer brushes, not the bristle ones, because bristle ones become a bit more harsh for a painting of this size. So I use mostly softer brushes because they provide a better quality, I think. But this is actually, this varies from person to person. But I feel using softer brush is good in this scenario. Here I'm using the same brush, but now since I'm done with the school building, I'm using it for some local houses and the foliage as well, because it had the lighter color already, so I can use it to manipulate the shapes and stuff. Adding some lighter marks to indicate lighter areas as well as darker areas. I generally use a very specific color combination for most seasons in India, and that involves the white and the warm yellow, yellow ochre, the red and burnt sienna, cobalt blue, and ivory black. I mean, I use the black as to darken areas because sometimes cobalt blue just fails to create a dark area because it's a lighter blue comparatively. So if you mix you know black into a green color, it will become a blackish green. If you mix it with a red color, it will become darker color. And also black creates a very beautiful green color with a warm yellow. And why I used warm yellow and yellow ochre? Yellow ochre is like everywhere. I mean, it's just a very common color here, and you lighten it, you darken it, it's always there and very useful in this particular area at least. And the warm yellow that I have is chosen because India is a warm country and not a very cool country, so everything looks warm even during this time when it's a lot comfortable compared to the other times in a year. It's still very much warm, so it's a very useful color. Here I'm mixing a warmish gray color and creating that lighter but slightly pale yellow color for the tree highlights. This sort of highlighting creates the depth against the shadows that have been put already. Here I'm adding a little bit more white and yellow to lighten the color to create more contrast. And at this stage I'm not doing any kind of detail, but rather indicating the shapes. We'll be focusing on suggested details, but here I'm not looking for a very realistic look, but rather you know kind of an impression of a scene. And since this kind of painting takes only about an hour, and I think it's good enough, to do a sketchy work and later use that as a reference for future paintings if you want to convert them into a future painting. But painting smaller references outside with photo references, I think that is going to give you, a huge advantage when you're trying to convert a scene that is similar to what you saw and painted, because you already saw the color, you already saw the shapes, and for details you can look at the references of the photographs and use your painting and your memory and uh, the experience that you had to create a better painting. Some of the things, like shadow colors and also the perspective, all of these become distorted while you take a photograph. When you paint from that photograph, things look like you have made a copy of a photograph. So I think it's better to um, do a small painting in nature and then convert it into a bigger one with the help of photographs and your sketch and your memory and the experiences that you had. Here I'm trying to focus on mostly values and color temperature and shapes, and that is how I simplify. And I'm not consciously focusing on any kind of detail right now because there are too many layers in this particular scene. There are the sky, then the buildings, and then the distant foliage, and then frontal buildings, then the trees in front, then there are buildings in front of you. So there are 6 or 7 layers in this. So it's better that you paint the values, and then if you have the time, then you focus on the detail rather than focusing on detail and missing out on the rest of it. And here the light is more or less stable, but if it had it been an evening scene, it would have been very difficult because light changes rapidly. But since this is afternoon, I mean, it's a very good time to paint. Here there was a wall. Initially I thought of putting it, but later on I decided to merge it with the background. I didn't like the wall positioning anymore because I painted this scene a number of times, but this time I feel the wall is obstructive to some degree. So I'm just blending it with the background. Here I'm increasing the temperature a little using pure yellow ochre. So the things that are in the distance are cooler and bluer in nature, and the things that are up front are brighter and more colorful saturation. Here I'm increasing a gray, I mean painting a gray section for the trees, and we'll be adding some highlights to that to indicate which part the light is coming from. But now I thought of you know painting the frontal section to create some sort of a contrast rather than waiting too much. But it's better to start from the distance and gradually move to the nearest section, because it's easier that way to determine the values. I'm using contrast for the house. There are 4 doors to that, And here the building had blue color, but since I'm not using a blue color, I'm using a mix of black and white, which creates a bluish impression in, you know, against the orangey foreground. So this is like a local village that we have, and the buildings are not of permanent nature. They're, just constructions done for a particular use, temporary constructions. So they do not represent any beauty, concept of beauty. Here I'm focusing more on the uh, buildings because it was getting a little late, and so I thought of doing the buildings because I already understood how the, light and shade on the trees were functioning. So I decided to focus on this thing. I could add a few more details later on from my reference photos. But I again think that it's better to start from the distant area and gradually move up front. Working on some cool shadows. It looks a little bit greenish, I don't know, but that's what I saw. Adding some details as well on this left hand side building, and there is a water tank. Will be adding a shadow to the left of that building, left hand side. But now I've moved to the details of the school building, so there are some windows, etc. A suggested detail, not too much. Some windows here and there. It's a gray color, not a black color. Now I'll be making some mistakes here, but we'll gradually rectify those. The shapes were a little wonky here and there, but trying to concentrate, and concentrating for 1 hour straight is a very difficult job. So, for plein air painting, it's very important that you plan before you start. Here I was, planning, but then gradually, lost concentration. But still, I'm, focusing very hard on it. There is slight problem with the perspective, so I corrected it. Plein air painting is not about too much perfection, but when you can do it, I mean, when you can achieve perfection, it looks really nice and more realistic. Here I'm adding more light to it. With yellow ochre and white, and this is like a very useful color in India. Wherever I went, I found yellow ochre, so I kept it as a very useful color. And I'm darkening some parts of it and adding shadows to it. Focusing very hard, adding some brown again. Now I have started working on the trees. These are eucalyptus. I started putting the highlights. Here I'm correcting the shapes of the tree a little, because I most of the time focus on the shapes of the things, because you know if the shapes are not right, I don't feel very comfortable with the picture. Even here some of the shapes of the buildings are not correct, but I can rectify those. But that tree is very important to me. I don't know, it's a personal thing. But again, I mean, the magic of plein air is totally dependent on three things: values, shapes, and color temperature above what color you're going to use. But sometimes a very bright blue or a very bright yellow, a powerful reddish color, they obviously add to the touch. So color is also very important. But since this is a study, I'm focusing on mostly the shapes and the basic things, abstraction, that I consider is part of the painting. Here I'm adding a little bit of warmth into the trees. Working on the eucalyptus branches and the trunks a little. Will rectify those. I continue to work on my sketches. So this is the shot of the finished painting, and if you have liked the video, then please click the like button and also subscribe for more videos to come. And also check out my website www.costumandfineart.com for more paintings. Thank you.